In the history of all the governments of Israel, what do you think is the biggest mistake of a government?
A government? Or
Any
specific
government,
one?
yeah, doesn't really matter. Just what is the mistake of doing something or not doing something?
It's a hard question. Not thinking enough steps forward.
In the future.
Just trying to deal with the current stuff, the 1 year, maximum 2 years, never see the whole picture, like in China when they see 8 years.
Okay, the question is, through the history of Israeli governments, what do you think is the biggest mistake that a government had made?
I think it's one thing that the relationship between the Arabic people and the Israeli people is not good. We could be very good friends, but we are not.
But in Israel itself? In Israel?
Yeah.
Okay.
Everybody is a good person, like the Arabic and the Israeli, but I think this is the mistake that make us how to say it in English.
How do you say it in Hebrew?
You know Hebrew? להגיע למצב הזה.
To get to the situation we're in.
Yeah, it is.
ההיסטוריה של מדינת ישראל, איזה טעות הממשלה כלשהי, לא משנה מה הטעות הכי גדולה שעשו? זו השאלה.
מה זאת אומרת מה הטעות הכי גדולה?
כאילו שעשו טעות שאתה חושב שהיה, כאילו עשו משהו שאתה חושב שהיה טעות.
אני לא מבקר, אני מצטער.
לא? כן.
זה טמון פה גם לשון הרע, אם אני אגיד טעות אז עשו, אז יש פה לשון הרע.
Okay. In the history, that's loud. In the history of all the governments,
yes.
What do you think is the biggest mistake that any government has made?
Every government did her mistakes, you know.
So is there something for you that you think is the biggest mistake?
I don't know.
Okay.
תגיד לי, איזה ממשלה עשתה הכי הרבה טעויות ואיזה טעות הכי גדולה? כולם. כאילו אין...
No, the biggest, הטעות הכי גדולה, כאילו...
כולם כאילו. כאילו חר המדינה גם ככה.
כולם עושים טעויות.
לא, אבל אין כאילו, אי אפשר להצביע על נקודה. כאילו, לא ימין ולא שמאל.
אבל the biggest mistake...
נו.
Yeah, that's the question.
אין.
What's the biggest mistake in your...
I know that Ben Gurion and Golda Meir did here country.
Well, okay.
This is the big mistake.
Why is it a big mistake?
Because it's not a very good place, Israel.
So where should it have been?
In America, something like that.
Okay. And you, what do you think the biggest mistake is?
אמיתי. בן גוריון וגולדה מאיר, לא שעשתה פה מדינה בכלל.
וואלה, אני לא יודע, I don't know. I think everybody doing mistakes.
Okay.
But the people doing the most biggest mistakes.
Why? Electing them?
Because let them doing that.
The history of Israeli governments, what do you think is the biggest mistake that a government made or by not doing something made a mistake?
You're talking about politics.
It could be social too, whatever you want. Whatever you think is the mistake.
What is the mistake of Israel?
Any government ever.
I think the problem of the Israeli issue is that we are not thinking in the long term. We are usually thinking on the short term in almost all the issues. And this is, I think, the problem of Israel. Thinking about the long term.
שישראל, ממשלות, מה הטעות הכי גרוע שעשו?
הכי גרועה?
כן, ממשלה.
שאנחנו יותר מדי טובים לאחרים ולא לעצמנו.
מה זאת אומרת? מי זה האחרים?
אחרים, זה עמים אחרים, זה אנשים שחיים פה. יש פה עם בפני עצמו שגם צריך לטפל בו.
אוקיי, תן דוגמה, כאילו, על מה...
אתן לך דוגמה, הכלכלה שלנו, אנחנו נותנים מסייעים לפלסטינאים שנמצאים פה, אם זה חשמל, אם זה מים, אם זה אוכל, אם זה כל דבר. כל הכסף שהם לא משלמים, אני משלם אחר כך, אני משלם על זה. אני משלם על זה בחשמל, אני משלם על זה במיסים, והרבה מאוד דברים. קודם כל אני חשוב, כמו כל מדינה מתוקנת בעולם, זו מדינה של יהודים, היא מוכרת כמדינה של יהודים, צריך לטפל פה ביהודים קודם כל. חס וחלילה יש פה בני מיעוטים גם כן, גם בהם צריך לטפל, אבל זה לא אומר שהם ראשונים ואני שני. נראה לי שזה לא הגיוני. זהו, בסך הכל אני חושב שאנחנו יותר מדי טובים לאחרים. אנחנו יותר מדי דופקים חשבון לאחרים. מקשיבים יותר לאחרים מאשר לעצמנו. אם זה למשל האריתראים פה, כל יום יש פה אונס. ולא סתם אונס, נכים, ילדים, ואף אחד לא עושה עם זה שום דבר. הם עדיין פה, הם גונבים, הם עושים הכל, ואף אחד לא מעניין אותו. בגלל שאנחנו טובים, העולם לא נותן לנו לתפקד כמדינה, אז אנחנו מבליגים.
In the history of all the governments, what do you think is the biggest mistake that a government has made?
Biggest mistake?
And it could be anything. She said
not separating the country and religion.
Yeah, that's a big topic here, but
for you, it's individual.
for everybody, yeah, I know. We sometimes not pursuing peace enough. Being very militant. At some points, in different points, it was pretty important to be that way, but still, basically. Sometimes I feel like the concept is not making peace and going ahead, but more political aspects like protecting your city and the government, stuff like that. So basically, personal needs went for national needs.
From the history of all the governments in Israel, what is the biggest mistake any government has done?
Come to Israel, to live in Israel.
What?
They come to they choose Israel, not Uganda.
The history of all the governments in Israel, what is the biggest mistake any government did?
What is the biggest mistake in the government?
Any government, yeah.
Why do you think you have a mistake?
You could say there was no mistake. It's okay.
I don't think you have some mistake.
לדאוג לאזרחים.
אוקיי, כמו מה?
כמו מה? כאילו הם מסתכלים די על עצמם, הממשלות של ישראל. הם לא מסתכלים על השכבות האחרות. כאילו אנחנו פה בתל אביב זה כמו סוג של בועה. כאילו כולם כיף להם, מסודרים בזה, אבל יש אנשים שקשה להם אפילו לסגור את היום חודש. הם צריכים להסתכל קצת על האנשים שמתחת לרמה שלהם.
In the history of Israeli governments, what do you think is the biggest mistake that a government made?
Not separating religion and country.
Okay, can you give an example?
Ever. Yes, for instance, in 1977, the militant religious people, we call them the Orthodox Jews, the very, very Orthodox Jews, they enter, like, how would I say it nicely? They added a law that for a woman in Israel to get an abortion, she must have like a committee to actually confirm this.
To allow it, yeah.
Yeah, to allow it. And sorry, that's my boyfriend.
It's okay.
And a woman cannot actually have an abortion in Israel unless she goes into this committee. So it's quite, I think it's terrible because we don't have a right on our own body.
Okay. Of the history of all the governments, what is the biggest mistake a government has made?
biggest mistake, מה הטעות הכי גדולה של הממשלה? שהיא קיימת. אני לא יכול להגיד כזה דבר. יהרגו אותי.
It could be any time, any, doesn't matter. It could be small.
תן לי לחשוב על זה רגע.
No problem.
מה הטעות הכי גדולה? חוץ מזה, גיא. הטעות הכי גדולה? כן. כל הורגים את כל הערבים. I don't know, I really don't know.
Okay. The question is, in the history of Israel, what the governments have made mistakes, obviously. What do you think is the greatest mistake that the government has made? A government.
A government?
Israeli government. I already asked the Palestinians this one.
What's the biggest mistake the Israeli government has made? Good question.
Or do you think there's no mistakes? I mean, no major.
No, nobody's perfect. I mean, the biggest mistake, I don't know if it's not a government mistake, but the assassination of Rabin was a huge mistake. It wasn't a government thing, but that was a big downfall. I think that was our greatest opportunity for success and peace. But obviously, to make peace happen, you're gonna need to get two strong political leaders on both sides that have balls and are willing to take risks. One side's not going to be enough.
Okay. Do you have any political mistake?
I don't know. I guess we could have done more. The government could have done more for peace, but I don't see a specific time in the past that was the peak of that, which is relevant. But in general, I think we could do more for peace.
So the question is, I'll come closer in a minute. The question is, of the history of Israel, all the governments, what do you think is the biggest mistake that any government has made?
So I personally think that the biggest mistake that an Israeli government made was unfortunately the 1973 unawareness to the war that was coming. So it was October, and I really truly sensed that Golda Meir, the prime minister, was a very good leader, and she had a good hunch that she was ought to call all of their reserve duty. Unfortunately, she got some really bad advice from the chief of command and chief of staff, all of the people in the army, and I think it was a really crucial mistake. I think had she actually called all of the reserve duty in Israel to be prepared, the 1973 war, which was unfortunately the worst war that Israel ever experienced, wouldn't have happened or been much different than what we know.
In the history of Israel, that short history, that a mistake was made, and what mistake do you think is the biggest mistake that the governments have made?
Again, I'm not really a political person, and my knowledge of history is not that deep, but of course there were mistakes made by the government, each of the governments. Biggest mistake, and again, it's only my opinion, the prolonged conquer of the Palestinian territory and the Palestinian people. Of the Arab population that didn't get to be in Israel when the declaration of Israel was made. And this is a big mistake that continuous mistake that we're having. We can feel the effects of it for all the history of Israel. And it should be resolved somehow.